So then we are back with more understandings from the time of the Second Tabernacle services, where we find in the Aramaic English translation of the word. This translation comes from the original manuscripts of the prophets of the Israelic lineage. So then we can understand the time of the end as per Yeshayahu the prophet. We find then in the 61st chapter the returning of the holy cities of the Messiah laid waste for many centuries, and also the Gentiles, including the trade of the end. So then the stick of the authority of the Ishmaelites then is restored. As far as we understand from the economy and also the trade of the end, there is unfortunately a push from the West, and then with this push they are trying to involve other nations such as Japan and Australia because of their strategic points, then trying to come up with another Babylonian system where then this specific time does not let. Let's understand what went on. During the 1,000 years of deceit, we find then from 1009 to 2009, then the Babylonian system, they could do whatever they wanted. Not during this time. This time there is an agenda and must be completed. So then, as far as what goes on with this situation related with America and the joining up with forces with Japan and Australia, we find then very disturbing because our country is nearly bankrupt. We are nearly ruined. Our economy was given then 2 years ago from IMF and even the Prime Minister of Israel. This system of ours would not last for more than 5 years. So then 2 years is gone. We have 36 months. So lined up our economy. So then we can become participants of the new system. Let's understand what's taking place at the moment. The U.S. Secretary is in a land of the Northern Kingdom, in the birthing of Soviet Union, and he is trying to come up with some sort of a plan to use then the Syrian crisis and then trying to mesmerize the mind of Mr. Putin to go on with the United States and its plan. Very dangerous, because we found out, our country, then this government was obviously hiding many plans from our American people, and some of them are then the Ozarks. There is a company by the name Overwatch Systems, and this company is drawing federal money, and then for the pretense of a family-owned home in the Ozarks, Mountain View, then there is over there the new capital of our country. This means stealing, and the FBI and the CIA are not doing their job. So then we find the American people being deceived. Not only these, then the non-legals, they understand where they're going to be ended up at. FEMA camps are being built, many of them, and if they are smart and do a research, they find these places having railroad tracks very near them. If they have a bit of a history in their minds, they understand how it was during the time of Nazi Germany. And then dividing up our country in 10 sectors. And then from there they think this government then can lead the world or then this country. So then let's find what goes wrong with this plan. First then, this moment, this country is trying then to come up with some sort of a plan of reintroduce then the Babylonian system. There is the other sector of this situation where then Bel and the Dragon must be then played also. We find then obviously Japan nearly ruined. They went through a tsunami some time ago, and the nation is nearly bankrupt. In fact, there were reports from last year that the economy of Japan would not last until October. So then we find from then on, then the Japanese are desperately trying to find a way of come out of the crisis. Then a couple of months ago there was a visit over there in China where these plans then came to fruition. We find the United States then once again trying to lead some sort of a Babylonian outcome of this crisis. But then the friendship is very fragile. quite honestly, U.S. then has prepared itself, at least at the moment. They have built the Ozarks and then underground areas and underground facilities and underground places for those who are of the government. But then the friendship is not very trustworthy, is it? Because can then the Japanese have the same privilege? No. If our system breaks, then both countries, they go down, including Australia. What is positive with Australia is they have a limited direct trade with China. But as far as buying 100 aircrafts and then another 12 submarines, it would drain their economy. But the idea joining up with United States and Japan is the printing out more money festival. So if a country breaks, then the others, they go down with. There is a problem. The Chinese system must remain. And then the BRICS, they are already protected with a banking system of their very own where they do not use the US monetary system. Thus a failure of plan from the United States. They don't realize whatsoever they do outside of the BRICS is not going to have any kind of a relevancy. On the contrary, their very evil plan of doing so returns to them. So we find then during this time where we found out that our decent President JFK was then murdered by our own government. We found then it was a person from the military that murdered our own president from a drain system underground in a manhole. That's where the shot came from. So then the novel of this library, that then Oswald was on the top of the library with a junky rifle, people are becoming more aware of it wasn't so. So this government is very evil. And we understand why JFK was murdered, don't we? During the time of Fulgencio Batista in Cuba, he was a scoundrel, drug dealer. And then Mr. Castro and Che Guevara from the mountains, they were very fierce fighters. Then at some point they had taken over. But then when JFK was elected shortly after, the Bay of Pigs was a failure. But then at the time it wasn't truly a big deal because there were other ways of maintaining control. Then this government forced JFK then to murder Mr. Castro. He refused it. So he paid with his life. So then at the moment we find then the Secretary of State going in the Soviet Union over there, the birthing of, and then he's trying to mesmerize Mr. Putin and using Syria as the pretense to come up with a junky plan of its own. The idea is then to drag the Soviet Union with the United States and Japan and Australia against China. Thus then we understand very precisely what it means, Daniel, regarding Bell and the Dragon. So then, during the time of the Cuban crisis, Mr. Castro, very wisely, he had then made friendship with the Soviets to maintain then the nuclear balance. We find during this precise time, it is the utmost importance of having a delegation from Cuba going then to the Northern Kingdom and establishing relations. Not only this, it is very important also Mr. Key from New Zealand then joining up with the Chinese, establishing a Chinese military base in New Zealand. So then we find these understandings very precise as we then unfold this plan of the Bell and the Dragon. And the dragon must win. This means whatsoever Mr. Castro and his team going to the Soviet Union, whatsoever they decide as far as starting a posting This means a patrol posting. So then nations later wanting trade with China, direct trade via computer, can be protected. Not only this, but then New Zealand becoming the South Pacific trading post. Then having a Chinese military base over there, protecting those nations wanting trade with China directly. Thus then shortly after, the relationship of New Zealand and Cuba. Purely and 100% trade related. Not taken over, not trying to take ahead of the situation. Simply a trading post in the South Pacific, and then later a friendship with Cuba and the Soviet Union, and obviously China. So Mr. Key has then very many events going on because he must make a decision. If he remains where he's at, he's going to be, in quote, engulfed by the bad decisions of Australia. And as he understands, there are then military people from the US already in Australia. And roughly started with a couple hundred, then 1,100, then 2,000. What did he expect would be the next number? So in order for the situation to become balanced, he must have a relationship with Mr. Key in China. So then a Chinese military base can be established then in the southern island of New Zealand. Thus then providing an understanding of the direct trade in absolutely legal. From then on, Mr. Key then visits with Mr. Castro or his team and establish also friendly relations. So then many years ago, during the time of the Cuban crisis and afterwards, there was a very wise saying from Mr. Castro regarding then Che Guevara. He was truly ahead of his time. So as we understand, we have become acquainted with a very critical point of the relationships amongst the countries. This time, then, we understand precisely Daniel and his writings regarding then the Bell and the Dragon. And we understand after this plan is set up, then the dragon gets his way. The United States and his partnerships then must retrieve for their own benefit. So there is not a moment of wasting. If the Northern Kingdom does not do as such, can expect a replacement. Because whatsoever we read from instructions must become intact, and is intact, and must be intact. This country, because of the wrongly translated Greco-Roman, they could do whatever they wanted back in the old days, but not anymore. So let's try to understand the danger of placing our economy at jeopardy. So then, it's not an arms race. Those are postings related with the protection of those countries wanting trade with China directly. Thus then providing the BRICS the initiation for the protection of this trade system, and ultimately then in the future must be then given to the Ishmaelites. Merely because of the plan of petroleum. This direct trade must then obviously become more voluminous as far as freighting, obviously requiring more crude. The most crude on our planet we find in Arabia, sons of Ishmael. It's a simple understanding of events. However, at the end of it, you understand then the stick being granted. So let's make sure then we understand during the time of Pearl Harbor, for instance, the existing admiral of the time said, "A smart enemy hits you where do you think you are safest the most?" We, United States, we think because we have a military, we can do whatever we want. So the plans are then, thus far, they think they are very safe doing it. It is precisely where then they are going down. And as far as Panama Canal, it's extremely important for the Panamanian people understanding these factors. Quite honestly, there is a desire of having trade, an increasing of trade. That's why then Panama Canal was then extended. So then let's understand the importance of the relationship with Cuba and Panama, Panama and then China, China and New Zealand and Cuba, and then New Zealand and Soviet Union. We are not talking about arms race. We are not talking about then having military posts for the intent of control, but participation. On the West, there is a desire for competition and taking over. It is an unrelenting, miserable desire for control, control freak. The system of the East is partnership, required in then postings in strategic areas for the protection of trade. This means then in the South Pacific, for instance, New Zealand obviously very wisely wanting themselves becoming then the trading post of the South Pacific. It's very advantageous. Also make space for a base of the Chinese. It's extremely important for the simple understanding of patrols. Because as then the trade increases, more ships coming then from the east towards the south, they must be protected. Because there is a situation in America, there is the Oz spirit. Oz spiritual movements. And these Oz can be reflected in many areas. Piracy, murder, music. So let's understand then the importance of having then a military posting for the protection of those ships. So then piracy can be limited, and then nations can start then doing their own trade, direct trade with China. In doing so, regular visits of those leaders must be very evident. As far as the inclusion of Cuba and then New Zealand, those are for the mere partnership of understanding what those kingdoms of the Northeast and South must do. In other words, they listen to their plans and they adapt. Cuba and New Zealand should not give their opinion as far as how it should be run. Because Daniel the 11th chapter gives us the precise understanding of this point. They are simply partners of the flow of the benefits coming from those decisions. Yet they have strategic places where then order can be stored and restored. in any event of piracy or any kind of a Oz spirit related with anarchy or any other against the Chinese system. So then during this time, what would be then the best course of action of this country? It would be what was explained before: retrieving and rebuilding, combining taxation and freighting, visiting with the freighters of this country and having them upgrade their system, then including taxes. When every time there is a label printed, then description, price, and taxation instantly goes directly to the computer of the government so they can balance the budget. And then restore the respect of JFK, because he was a very decent guy. And our own government murdered him for no reason.